Nottinghamshire is a great place to live, work or visit. As your fire and rescue service, we are proud to say that we've been rated good at what we do in protecting and serving our communities. We are good at keeping people safe and secure, being efficient in how we do this, and at looking after our people. Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service. When you need us, we are here for you. Nottinghamshire is a great place to live, work or visit. As your fire and rescue service, we are proud to say that we've been rated good at what we do in protecting and serving our communities. We are good at keeping people safe and secure, being efficient in how we do this, and at looking after our people. Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service. When you need us, we are here for you.
Everyone, happy New Year. Are we ready to go live? Excellent. Well, good morning, welcome to the Community Safety Committee. I've got apologies for absence. Firstly, Councillor Upton, we've got Councillor Lee substituting. Morning, Jono.
Thank you.
Any declarations of interest from anyone? No? Wonderful. Item 3 then is the minutes of the meeting from the 7th of October. I'm happy to move those. Has anybody got any questions or comments, or happy to second for me? Thank you, Nick. We will have to accept those then. Excellent, thank you very much. And then straight into business, we've got item 4, which is the service delivery performance update, which is page 13 on your agenda. Who's going first, Andy?
It's myself. Yes, thank you.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay, so the response element of this report, it largely is up until the end of November, which was the sort of last completed month for us to go out. Some of the figures are relating to quarter 2, which I'll come on to, particularly the ones about control facts and figures. So starting at 2.1, so between the start of September and the end of November, we attended over 2,500 incidents, which was slightly down on last year, which is obviously a positive report, just slightly less than 1% decrease on the previous year. 2.2 though for the year as a whole, we're anticipating incident numbers to reach about 11,300 this year. Now that's largely due to the significant increases that we had in July and August, which we spoke about last time, which is going to constitute about a 12% increase year on year from the previous year. Figure 1 on 2.3 shows that incident numbers in the last 3 months have remained pretty stable compared to other years. So here we're talking September, October, November, where Each month, attendance at incidents was at around 800, 900 incidents, which is very similar to same period previous years. And then figure 2 shows a breakdown of the incident types. Now, what can be shown in figure 2 really is that over the last 12 months, special service calls and false alarms have remained stable, which they tend to year on year. There's no real variation from previous years in this graph. The only thing that is around fires, where we can see this big spike around July and August, which again we spoke about last time, which differs really from the typical year where fires tend to peak in the spring, remain high in the summer and then drop down in autumn and winter time. So we have had a variable this year, which we all know the reasons why. 2.5, figure 3 shows the breakdown of incidents by district. So this is year to date. So far, 22-23 shows, unsurprisingly, City of Nottingham is most incidents, over 2,300, with Rushcliffe being the least at under 550. So 2.6 talks about breakdown of incidents by priority type. Now for this we're talking about our incident types, P1 incidents being the most critical, that pose a immediate threat to human life, risk of injury and require an intervention to save life. P2 incidents pose serious hazard, high risk threat to the environment, society and property. P3 incidents are the low level type incidents which pose potential hazard to human life and environment, but confirmed low hazard for human life. So the chart at figure 4 shows the breakdown of the incident types that we have. You'll see P1 incidents remain fairly constant throughout the 12-month period, with the P3 incidents peaking in July and August, as we spoke about last time, just because of the hot summer. Now, a key CRMP target is around attendance time of the first appliance to incidents. Now, we spoke in depth last time about the fact that we'd exceeded the 8-minute target for that quite significantly in the summer in Q2 because of the volume of calls and the appliances being turned out here, there and everywhere around the county. Now, pleased to report that actually in the period September to November, the average attendance time has dropped again below the 8-minute target at 7 minutes 57, which has started to bring down the overall annual average down. So the annual average now sits at 8 minutes 23, which is actually 13 seconds less than what was reported last time. So as we predicted last time, the figure is dropping post that peak in July and August. On-call availability is talked about in 2.8. Now we have the target of the service at 85% availability for our on-call sections. So far, availability in 22-23 is averaging at 86.2%, so just slightly above the average, above the target figure. And the breakdown by stations can be seen in figure 6. So what's really positive is 7 of the on-call sections are performing above their target, with really key availability being given at Hucknall, Miston, Newark and Warsop, which are all in the very high 90%. The station that stands out, which we've discussed before, is Southall, unfortunately, where we do struggle to maintain a availability anywhere close to the target at that station for a number of reasons around numbers available at the station and recruitment to that station. Figure 7 under 2.10 shows a longer term overview of on-call station availability. It breaks it down per quarter since 1920. And you can see actually largely there, apart from a slight dip in Q2 21-22, we are on or above the target of 85% for the vast majority of quarters. We then go on to talk about Ashfield and Retford in particular, which obviously was requested when we moved to the day shift crewing. So again, this is all figures year to date to the end of November. Ashfield, slight improvements to Ashfield, which I'm happy to report. So over a 24-hour period, one on-call appliance has been available for just over 86% of the time at Ashfield, which is a improvement on previous year, in effect, where it was below 80%. Between the hours of 8 till 7, which is the day shift time for those day shift crewed stations, one on-call appliance has been available for 71.4% of the time, which again is higher than the average from last year, where it was at 64%. And overnight time, between 7 at night and 8 in the morning, at least one on-call appliance has been available 96.5% of the time in Ashfield. 2 on-call appliances have been available 20% of the time. Again, both those figures were an improvement on what was being achieved last year. In Retford, slightly different story. Over the 24 hours, one on-call appliance has been available 86.6% of the time, so above our target and number, but that is a slight drop on availability last year, where it was 87.9. During the daytime between 8 and 7, one on-call appliance has been available 76.8% of the time on average, which again is a slight drop on numbers in 21-22. And between 7 at night, 8 in the morning, one on-call appliance has been available 93.6% of the time. 2 on-call appliances available 27.98% of the time. Both those figures are actually slight improvements on the previous year. So, a key part of our ongoing commitment to ensure resources are mobilised to emergency incidents in a timely manner is around metrics for joint control. So what we're looking at is the performance measures for joint control. Now these differ slightly from the rest of the report because these are actually provided on a quarterly basis. So the figures here are up to the end of quarter 2 rather than the 30th of November. Now obviously quarter 2 being impacted by those mammoth numbers of calls that we received in July and August, which has actually caused the metrics that we use to be slightly under where we would want them to be. So for example, the first metric is around call answering time, where it's around the percentage of 999 calls answered within 7 seconds, and the target for that being 96%. Now, figure 8 shows that that figure dropped in quarter 2. It dropped to about 94% of calls being answered in 7 seconds, which was simply because of the high volume of calls that were being received. Similarly, the second metric is around call handling times. Now we have a target of 89 seconds for the call to actually be handled. So that's from the time it's answered for the operator to deal with all the information they're receiving and actually get that fire engine mobilised. Now again, our performance levels dropped slightly in quarter 2, where we were up at 92 seconds, again simply because of the number of calls that they were handling and also the complexity of some of the information that was coming in, trying to ascertain where the fires were actually happening. Final metric for joint control is around system availability. Now we've discussed previously around some of the difficulties we've had with the mobilising system in the past. We have a target of 99% availability for the mobilising system. Now in quarter 2, the availability has just dipped slightly to just below 98% availability. Work continuously ongoing to address some of the issues that we are, and as you know, we are currently working towards a replacement mobilising system in 2024. Okay, that's my bit.
Thank you. Well, before we move on, is there any questions?
Yeah.
Just a quick one. You said about 86 seconds about answering the calls. Obviously, in other services, people will stay on the line to help them through, to support them. I'll take it that still happens.
Oh, yes.
86 seconds to send out the fire engine.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So we still provide all the fire survival guidance, and yeah, sometimes the actual time the operator will be on the call will be significantly longer than that because they'll be dealing with all that side of it.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I've got a bit of a sore throat, so I'm not sweeting. Just Happy New Year, by the way. Thanks, Andy. Just to tolerate my stupidity for a minute, if we just go back to 2.8, in terms of on-call station availability, obviously we've got other stations other than this, haven't we? We've got 2 in the city, and we've got West Bridgeford.
Yes.
Just bearing in mind other business, why aren't they included in that?
In those,
yeah.
because they're whole-time stations,
Right.
so they're available 24 hours a day,
Okay.
365 days. This is only the on-call sections where we have periods where they are unavailable because of staffing.
Oh,
shortages.
so we've got 24/7 on
Absolutely.
that. Okay,
yeah.
so that's not affected.
Yeah, the other 12 stations 24/7.
Okay, and then also when you're talking about, in terms of appliances, we only look at the first appliance availability? Or am I...
For the on-call? Yeah, well, all of them only have one appliance
Right.
on on-call, apart from at Retford and Ashfield over the nighttime period where there's actually 2 on-call appliances, which is why we touch on the availability under 2.12 and 2.13 for those sections in particular.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thanks, sorry, I'm just getting it.
Yeah, no problem.
Anyone else on this part? All All right, thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Brennan, are you taking?
Yep, so I'll take prevention and protection, those two sections. So between the 1st of August and the 30th of November last year, we've completed 4,745 safe and well visits, and we would set ourselves a target of 13,000 safe and wells for the year. So that gives us approximately just over 36% of those that have now been completed, which is really encouraging. Of the number of safe and wells we've completed, over 45% have been to the over 65 age group, and just under 39% have been to disabled persons. The reason we identify the over 65 age group and disabled persons are because they're most at risk from fire if the fire occurs in the home, and most at-risk groups, really. In terms of safety zone, I'm sure members are familiar with safety zone. The 2-week period in September was undertaken at the National Water Sports Centre at Owen Pierpont, and we invited 17 schools from across the county and city. Schools we determined to be risky, not actually the fact that the schools are risky, but the demographics associated with those schools, the instances of fire in those areas, everything contributed to those being our target pupils that we'd like to get a safety message across to. So we had 350 pupils participate in a pre-survey 3 months prior. That's assessing their knowledge prior to attending the safety zone event, just seeing what they know. And then obviously we'll visit a period after, and we'll assess the knowledge once again. So in terms of safety zone, it focuses on key stage 2 children and delivery of safety information. Now it's a multi-agency event, it's not just the Fire and Rescue Service. We have colleagues from Nottinghamshire Police, the Transport Police, Western Power, the Dogs Trust, the RNLI and VEER in terms of the road safety team, and also East Midlands Ambulance Service. And across that 2 days event that we held in September, we had 1,142 pupils, 131 staff. So it was a real big hitter in terms of numbers, in terms of attendance, and the vehicle that we've got to get a message across really in terms of community safety. Between August and November, the education team also did community engagement activities, both across the city and county, that was aimed at children that are home educated. What we've recognised is that there's children that are not in mainstream education that are missing out on those community safety messages, and they would be a target audience for us. So we've done interventions in alternative education provision settings that looks at tackling behaviour around deliberate fire settings. That's been really, really well received by those families in an alternative education setting. Moving on, so you're probably aware that we do a variety of road safety interventions, one of which is the Biker Down courses. In essence, just to refresh members, Biker Down is a course for motorcyclists who are travelling with other motorcyclists, and the colleague, the friend may have come off the motorbike. So it's a safe way of removing the helmets and giving initial first aid prior to the emergency services attendance. That's really, really gone well within the motorcycling community. We also do other education activities for post-16s, for new drivers, those on the cusp of starting their driving careers. And we deliver that in the education settings, just to give them some of the dangers and hazards and things to watch out for prior to them starting the driving careers. We also do that in combination with the police and the ambulance service and VEER, so it's a multi-agency approach that we do to road safety. I'm sure some of the members have seen in the past the virtual reality goggles that we use for this as well. So it basically simulates them being in a car with the friends, going along a country road and an incident happening and looking at some of the hazards. So it is quite, it can be traumatic for the individuals, but it does show them the consequences of driving and driving irresponsibly. So that's been well received. Moving on to protection, we've completed, or our key for completing fire safety audits is 1,200 fire safety audits. That's one of our CRMP commitments. Between the 1st of April and 30th of November, we've completed 763 audits. Of these, 266 required informal action by the service, and 29 formal statutory notices have been issued. If you look at figures, figure 12, the fire safety audits, I'm really, really proud of the team in terms of the number of fire safety audits that they've been delivering over the last 12-month period. If you look, it's considerably more than 21-22 and 20-21. Now, some of that is related to COVID and businesses being in lockdown, so we've been able to increase it. But we have generally increased the productivity and the output and the effectiveness and efficiency of the department. So I think it's worth me as the department head noting that the performance has really increased in terms of that. 2.27, we've set ourselves a target of 500 business safety check audits in 22-23, and between the 1st of April and 30th of November, we've completed 287. This is slightly down on the target. That's because a number of the supervisory managers have yet to complete the qualifications. Once they've completed their education training, they also have to complete a portfolio of evidence. Once they've completed that portfolio of evidence, they have to have shadow audits and supervision while they're undertaking those, just to make sure that they're on track and they're competent in terms of that. So it's a gradual increase that you'll see over the coming months as more and more of our supervisory managers become confident and competent to undertake the fire safety audits. You can see in 2.28, it's not just fire safety audits that we undertake. There's a number of post-fire inspections, following up complaints, enforcement notices, prohibitions, building consultations, etc., etc. So it's quite a broad church that the Fire Protection Department's involved with, not just inspecting buildings, and that does take up a considerable amount of the time in addition to the audits. Again, you'll be aware that we've set ourselves a challenging target of reducing the number of unwanted fire signals by 3%. And there's a paper following this paper from Mr. Sharman that's going to touch on that in terms of unwanted fire signals. But between the 1st of April and the 30th of November, we responded to 3,107 unwanted fire signals. Unfortunately, this is a 10% increase in the same period. We also responded to 126 lift rescues. This, fortunately, was an 8% decrease in the same period. If you look at figure 13, that gives you an indication of where we're at in terms of the unwanted fire signals. So you can see this year we are receiving more unwanted fire signals, but again, that could be related to 2 years of COVID and the rest of the country being in lockdown, and this is probably very much the country getting back to normal from where we would expect those figures to be in this period. In terms of unwanted fire signals, the premise owner for non-domestic premises will receive a letter from us outlining the responsibilities in terms of fire safety. If they have a fourth alarm occurrence, they're contacted by one of my business safety advocates to give them advice on how they can improve the fire safety measures within the building. If we get a sixth occurrence, that's really indicating to us that they've probably got managerial issues within the building in terms of the fire safety regime. So we do send a fire safety inspector then to take a full audit or inspection of the building to see if there's any underlying issues that's causing the number of unwanted fire signals. And really see if there's any underlying concerns about fire safety we would have as a service. And again, if you look at 2.31, I'm sure members are now more than familiar with the work that we're doing as part of the Joint Audit and Inspection Team in collaboration with Nottingham City Council. And in this period that we're talking about from up to November, we've conducted 16 inspections and 23 re-inspections. So that gives us a total of 180 buildings that have now been inspected both jointly by ourselves and the City Council. And as you're aware, these will be the high-rise buildings, predominantly in the city centre, really complex and take a long time to undertake the audit and look at the fire safety regime in those buildings. We've still got a further 25 buildings to inspect. They're over 18 metres and a large proportion, 272 buildings that are below 18 metres that still require an inspection by the joint team. So a lot of work that's going on. A bit like painting the Forth Bridge, as soon as we've done those, more buildings are being put up in the city. You've only got to look around the city curtilage and high-rise seems to be the way that we're going in the city. So that will continue to impact on the workload of the Fire Protection Department. I'm sure you're aware the Building Safety Act has now got its royal assent and the government's consulting on the implementation of that act. And we anticipate it's going to be fully implemented by October of this year. That has seen the creation of the new building safety regulator, with the Health and Safety Executive being appointed as the main lead body for that new regulator. The Health and Safety Executive are going to establish multidisciplinary teams from both local authority, fire and rescue service and Health and Safety Executive to manage the building safety regulator's statutory responsibilities. The NFCC, National Fire Chiefs Council, has been working with the Health and Safety Executive to look at the delivery model that we're going to have across the country. And there's a consensus that that's going to be a regional delivery model. So for the East Midlands, we've identified that Leicester and Nottingham have the biggest number of high-rise buildings. So there's going to be a multidisciplinary team based in both Leicester and Nottingham to undertake the safety regime and safety inspections of these buildings. The government have given us additional funding for one fire safety inspector to be seconded to this multidisciplinary team. So the idea being that we all bring our different skills and experiences to this disciplinary team so that we can fulfil the legal obligations that have been set out in the Building Safety Act. Further legislation, so there's a lot of new legislation coming in. The Fire Safety England regulations will become law on the 23rd of January, so the 23rd of this month. This is particularly relevant for buildings which are above 18 metres in height, so that's the most high risk high-rise buildings. There's various different statutory regulations that have been placed on the duty holders, the building owners, in terms of the external wall systems, deficiencies in fire safety equipment and building plans. So there's all sorts of requirements that's going to be placed on the building owners to inform us of any deficiencies that they've got. If the fire alarm system's going to be out for more than 24 hours, if the lifts are not working, they've got to notify us so that we can make operational decisions about our attendance at those buildings. And this is very much on the back of the legislation that's come from the Grenfell tragedy. So we're working really, really closely with that. There is a lot of work that's going on. We are required to receive building plans for all buildings that are in scope for this, so that we've got detailed plans of all these buildings readily available to our operational crews. National Fire Chief Council have been very active working with Home Office and various other government departments in terms of the work and supporting government to look at the new fire safety regimes. And they've come up with a statement regarding single staircase buildings within 18 metres. And it's the NFCC's position that single staircases should only be applicable in high-rise buildings up to 18 metres. Anything above that, we would want to look at a dual staircase. And that's very much so that we can evacuate the residents while we can actually make an attack, an aggressive attack, and rescue people firefighting-wise. Because I'm sure you're aware of some of the issues at Grenfell, where it's a single staircase trying to bring people out as we're trying to get in. It causes operational difficulties. That concludes it, Chair.
Thank you very much, Bryn. Any questions, Nick?
Sorry, it's always me. Thanks, Bryn. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, there's good news in terms of protection. On page 21, when you're looking at 2.28, there's significant improvements in the fire safety audits, which we're all happy with. I just wondered why is that? Why we managed to achieve it?
New ways of working. So a lot of the ways of working have been improved in terms of efficiency. So simple things like the number of audits were randomly generated and passed to an inspector. So one may have been in Lenton, one may have been in Stenton, and one in Sherwood. Why don't we give them a batch of inspections that are all in Lenton together? Little simple operational procedures things, really, the day-to-day activities that's improved that in terms of efficiency. The booking of fire safety audits, getting administrators to book as opposed to the inspectors, just generally day-to-day management of improving the workload and making performance and efficiency a key objective within the department has really focused their attention in terms of that.
So, the only thing I was thinking as well is in terms of unwanted fire signals on the next one, 2.29, obviously they've gone up, and I was thinking like you, it might be COVID, I suppose. We could only compare with pre-COVID stats, so something we've obviously got to keep our eyes on. I mean, I don't know what else we can suggest in terms of what you're doing, but that's a concern if they're going up, isn't it?
So that's going to be the next paper, and I don't want to steal mix thunder on that. But there are various trends that we are noticing, and again, I don't want to steal your thunder on that, and it's a nice segue, I suppose, into the next paper.
Do you want to come in now or wait?
Yeah, but not unlike any other cities getting more and more buildings over 18 metres, and it's obviously a big growth area. You clearly put an extra resource in terms of a person going in and doing that. Do you think that resource is good enough in terms of moving forward? Because it is still going to continue to be a growth area, and it is still going to be where the biggest danger is.
So one of the issues that we've got, or one of the things we've got at the moment, we've got 2 inspecting officers that are dedicated to the JATE as it stands at the moment. Building safety regulator and the multidisciplinary teams will take a lot of that work and that burden off directly by departments, hence the new legislation. So one of those inspecting officers that's currently with JATE is likely to be the person that's seconded to the building safety regulator. So really we're going to have a multidisciplinary team that's going to assist us. I suppose we're a forerunner really. If you look at it, we've actually got a multidisciplinary team in Nottingham at the moment with the City Council and Fire. And really I suppose the legislation is catching up with us, and government's now implementing a new multidisciplinary team that's got statute behind it.
Surely other cities have got that, surely.
There's probably 2 or 3, but I was at a national conference in November where we were showcasing the work nationally that Nottingham is doing as a city. So again, I'm really, really proud of the work that we've done for JATE, and other cities are copying what we've done. But yeah, 2 or 3, probably that's it in the country.
Johnny?
Thank you. I've never lived in a city. I've always lived in rural areas. So before I became on the fire authority, and we had all the issues with Grenfell, I would never even consider how difficult it would be to get people out of the tower. We've mentioned it twice now.
Yeah.
Is obviously we're aware if there is a fire predominantly in the city, that we're going to have people from all over the place that go there. How much training regularly are the other services having on getting people out of the tower? Because obviously over Christmas I saw Newark came over to a pond and did ice training.
Yeah.
Well, how much training do they get in the towers, training and
So we've got standard education packages that are delivered to all firefighters across the city and county, and you're quite right to point that out, because in periods of high demand, it will be fire appliances and firefighters from across both Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire that are brought in and could be dealing with high-rise incidents, and that has happened. So that training is mirrored across the county. We've got 25, 27 probably is now high-risk buildings that we determined that have got issues in terms of the fire protection measures. All crews have an education training package to understand those buildings, where the layout of the buildings is, where the fire alarm panels are. And initially when we rolled that out, it raised eyebrows at some of the more rural stations. They're saying, well, why do we need to know this? Because in periods of demand, you will be moved in, as you can probably imagine, like a pincer movement. They are moved into the city and will be covering those areas. So yeah, absolutely. A firefighter is a firefighter no matter where they are in the city or county.
Yeah.
We'll have had that in before.
Can I come back to this?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I think realistically you have to look at Grenfell to say that wasn't a 2-3 hour job, that was days.
Yeah, correct.
So the truth of the matter is we are going to be pulling in Newark, say example,
Right.
and saying you might have to do an 8-hour shift. So no, it's
And we also
Correct,
share
yeah.
that risk information with Leicestershire and Derbyshire, because as you're aware, we've got tri-service control and the county boundary doesn't matter in terms of mobilising. So if we have a significant fire in the city centre, it's quite feasible to have 4 or 5 appliances from Derbyshire. If they're closer than our fire appliances, will be in, and it will be a multi-service approach to those incidents.
appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Nicola?
Thank you. 231. So I appreciate that all these inspections can be incredibly complex and lengthy, but there's 25 more buildings over 18 metres. Have we got any sort of time scale, or is it just as long as it takes?
It's as long as it takes. Unfortunately, I'm sure you're more than aware that some
Yeah.
of the challenges, the financial challenges with the City Council, and we did have 2 to 3 inspecting officers from the City Council in terms of environmental health officers that were supported. A decision was made probably a year, 18 months ago that the number of environmental health officers seconded to Jane would be reduced to 1. So it really is one individual from the City Council's point of view. And really, I suppose we've scaled our resources back because we had 2. But there's little point as having 2 dedicated to Jane when there's only 1 of our opposite number from the City Council. It takes as long as it takes. Some of the buildings that we have inspected, and we've done it on a risk basis, we've identified what we think are the riskiest buildings and targeted those, if that's the right word, in terms of the audits and inspections first. But there's still ongoing work. Of those, there's continuous work that's going on, because some of it is linked with central government legislation in terms of the redemptions, in terms of the cladding and the types of building that's involved with these.
Excellent. Anything else on these items? All right, thank you very much. We'll move on. So we are on item 5, which is the reductions in unwanted fire signals, which starts on page 27. But before we get into the item proper, I'm aware we have a question from our colleagues at the FBU. Anyone would like to ask it?
No, thank you, Jason, and Happy New Year to everyone as well.
Yeah.
Okay, the service is proposing a non-attendance of fire appliances between the hours of 700 and 1900 at hospitals. Although the majority of these calls at these properties turn out not to be fires, the complexity and size of these buildings can cause the determination and location of the fire to take a considerable amount of time. If there is no fire service attendance at these properties that have sleeping risk and immobile patients, then should a fire break out that is not tackled immediately, the consequences could be devastating. There is very little to no financial savings in making these changes, and the FBU believe that ultimately lead to further cuts to the service in the future. Is the fire authority prepared to risk the lives of the public just to reduce the number of turnouts per year?
Thank you for your question. I've got an answer, then obviously we're going to go into a debate on this item, but thank you. So the answer is, as part of the service's Futures 25 efficiency programme, the service committed to changing and reducing demand on response resources. This is also supported by a commitment in the service's community risk management plan to reduce false alarms by 10% by 2025. The commitment and drive to reduce the service's attendance at false alarms will assist the service resource to risk, further enabling the service to proactively prioritise activities that keep people safe. Responding to unwanted fire signals that are generated by automatic fire alarms accounts for approximately 35% of all incidents attended. Hospitals are the biggest contributor to false alarms. Attendance at false alarms places a significant impact on the service's resources, diverting valuable time and resources from other preventing, protecting and responding activities. Hospitals are well-run and professionally managed facilities with good levels of fire protection. Arrangements for fire safety and the care of patients is the responsibility of the hospital's responsible persons. The service is committed to continually supporting healthcare professionals and hospital fire safety advisors ensure that hospitals are as safe as possible by continuing to support and offering advice on both fire prevention and protection best practices. In the event of uncertainty of fire, hospitals should call the fire service and not rely on automatic fire alarms as a method of alerting the fire service. A direct call ensures the service can assess the situation and send the required resources in a timely manner. The service will work with hospital responsible persons to ensure that they are prepared for the changes, ensuring procedures are in place and appropriate to the type of building. That's the official response. As you appreciate, we haven't had a debate on this yet, and I think I'm really grateful that you've shone a light on this. It's really important for us to do it. I want Mick to be able to present the report and then us have a proper debate. I don't know if you've got supplementary or you're happy to watch us have that debate. Right, thank you very much. But Mick, are you happy to present to members so we can understand what's been asked of us and why it's come about?
Okay, thank you, Chair. As the Chair's already within his statement and as Bryn alluded to earlier, there is a clear commitment that was made in the services CRMP to reduce unwanted fire signals by 10% by 2025. Additional to that was also a paper that highlighted activities at the request of members, that the reduction in the levels of activities that are conducted by response and to look at the capacity and ways of reducing capacity for response crews as part of the Efficiencies 25 programme. The current approach that we've got is highlighted in 2.1 and 2.2 of the report, and that gives a brief summary. I can go into further detail regarding that. But the approach has been in place since June 2018, and that was a move to a position where we align our unwanted fire signals policy with our support with our tri-service partners, both Leicestershire and Derbyshire Fire and Rescue Service. And I think it's fair to say that we have seen some success and we've seen some reductions over that period. But as has already been alluded to, very much in only in a small detail, that them improvements or that improvement in performance has now plateaued. In fact, we're seeing an opposite in that trend, which I'll go on to explain. Within 2.4, it's worth to note that the services attended 3,480 calls in 2021-22. That is an increase of 11% from previous years. Now, whilst previous years or the previous 2 years certainly was impacted by government COVID restrictions, I think you can see from the table in see in the table in table 1 in 2.6 that consistently over the past 5 years, unwanted fire signals equate to approximately about 35% of all calls that we attend. Unwanted fire signals can be classified in a number of ways, but essentially what it is that we would receive a call, and that call can come from a number of different places, but generally from alarm receiving companies, which are almost a third person or a third organisation that sit between where the alarm actuates and almost like a call centre, and then it's passed on to the fire and rescue service. That is the way that they are automatically generated. And the challenge with that is that on the majority of the occasions when we receive a call from the alarm receiving company, what they're essentially doing is saying there is an alarm sounding, and that is it. We get very little intelligence about what the circumstances around that alarm is. So a high percentage, I'm talking about an extremely high percentage, which I'll are going to talk about shortly, are unwanted fire signals. And it's an unwanted fire signal when we've done the investigation and we've classified why, what caused that alarm. Now you'll see in 2.7 that we classify them for the purpose of reporting to central government as false alarm apparatus, which is generally a problem on the system. It could be a design fault or a malfunction. A good intent, false alarm good intent. Good intent is generally somebody might have believed that they can smell smoke, or they've got particular concerns, and they'll press a call point. That would be a good intent. Malicious, as it states there, and it's quite obvious. And you'll also see from table 2 that the majority of calls that we receive are down to apparatus, and this is faults on the system and faults in the design of the system. So that's where the majority of the calls come from. As Bryn's already alluded to, the fire protection team work very closely with the responsible persons of these premises, and under the regulations of the reform order, the 2005 regulatory reform order, there are provisions in the order for us to work with premises and to work closely with the responsible persons who has got ultimate control of the premise to reduce down the number of unwanted fire signals. This is very challenging, and this work continues, and there's been lots of effort and lots of time that's been put into reducing unwanted fire signals by fire protection team. Whilst we've had some success in reducing unwanted fire signals, there are a number of challenges that we now face. One of those challenges being in terms of other societal factors that have impacted on the number of false alarms that we now attend. And through the ongoing monitoring of unwanted fire signals and the production of this report, it's become quite evident that we're seeing increases from unwanted fire signals in single domestic premises and also sheltered accommodation. And that's predominantly around services such as the telecare system and the lifeline systems. Now, hard evidence to suggest why that is the case it's quite difficult to determine. But I think it's also worth to note that within the paper we're not suggesting a change to our response to these premises, and that's because we do see that the levels of vulnerability and we believe our time and response is well placed by still responding to these premises. As you'll see in the figure 1, 2.10, top 5 premise types from where we tend to want to fire signals. And as you'll see over the past 5 years, that the largest single contributor is hospitals. And you'll see that, as stated below, that those types of premises make up the vast majority of unwanted fire signals that we attend. When we attend an unwanted fire signal, and we attend them in such a large proportion, and the large proportion turn out to be exactly that, unwanted fire signal, it's bound to have a detrimental effect on the resources within the service. And what I mean by that is that if we are attending unwanted fire signals, we are not doing something else, whether that is being able to respond to other emergencies, or whether that is to carry out other activities in regards to reducing down levels of risk, whether that be prevention activities, whether that be prevention activities, or whether that be simple training, familiarisation with buildings. Whatever activity that is planned is obviously disrupted by the attendance of unwanted fire signals. I think it's also worth noting it's generally the same stations that do get impacted on as well. It's the same stations. Across the country, there is different approaches to the reduction of unwanted fire signals, and there's a plethora of different ways that this can be achieved. There is overall guidance that's issued by the National Fire Chiefs Council about how this might be achieved. There is, at one end of the scale, you'll see no changes to the policy. The other end of the scale, there are some fire and rescue services that do not attend any automatic fire alarms. And there is lots of fire and rescues that are different, or a scale in between those activities. Currently, we have an exemption list. We have buildings on there that, regardless of whatever comes through, we would attend, because we feel that the risk is of a nature that we feel that a response is the safest way to reduce that level of risk. Other premises, and as an example, maybe a commercial premise, a shop or a garage. We might receive a call from the alarm receiving centre, and we would call challenge that. We'd ask the control operators would ask certain questions, and we would then determine if we need to respond or not. The proposals are that Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service will adopt a blended approach to try and decrease unwanted fire signals further. In 2.3 and 2.4, we've tried to identify there that we would like to change some of the focus and the analysis that we undertake regarding the reporting of unwanted fire signals. And it's very clear, as I've already said, that the three main causes are apparatus, malicious and good intent. If it's an apparatus problem, it's quite clear that the protection team, under the guidance of Area Manager Coleman, is best placed to do that investigation, that intervention. In terms of the other two, which are either somebody's done it maliciously or they've done it for the right reasons, there are a number of different reasons that might be the case. We now believe that it's probably intervention and support and guidance is probably best placed through the prevention team, again under the leadership of Area Manager Coleman. But what we are suggesting is, because we want to be more detailed and accurate in the analysis that we give, that in future reports to the Community Safety Committee, we'll break that down a little bit further so we can clearly see where we've got problems going forward. So at the minute they just lump together, and they probably hide some of the trends that we need to be sort of working with. Another important element is the incident reporting system, which is the IRS. The IRS is it's a system that we are required to complete in every incident that we undertake. That's then reported back to central government, and this is where they where we account for the data and the returns that we return to central government. Through additional scrutiny that's been provided, we have identified some anomalies, and those anomalies are based upon individuals reporting that it's an unwanted fire signals when actually it's not an unwanted fire signal, it's an actual fire. And what an example of that would be, typically one would be, is if a alarm's been signalled by a burnt cooking from a toaster, it's then put back as false alarm apparatus on some occasions, but it's not false alarm apparatus. The apparatus has worked perfectly fine. The fault is around the management systems within that building to have a toaster that's placed directly underneath a fire detector. So we want to include more scrutiny and more challenge to around about the reporting. We want to engage in education with the individuals that complete the IRS system. Call charging is a mechanism that's used by a number of fire and rescue services. Through changes of the Localism Act, it gave fire and rescue services the ability to charge for responding to a report of fire. And it goes into details of why a fire service can charge for that. One of the things that, one of the bits that we'd like to highlight at page 32 is that the changes in legislation allowed the fire and rescue service to charge for fire in attendance if it's a direct or indirect result of warning equipment that's malfunctioned or been misinstalled, and secondly, if this is a persistent problem. We are not suggesting here that we start off in a very aggressive approach and start charging individuals for the ones that happen very infrequently. But we would like to consider charging as a tool within our, to give us a tool to deal with persistent offenders that continually flaunt the advice that we give individuals. And there are certain criteria within that are identified in the Localism Act. It talks about the abilities not to charge public bodies. It's primarily focused on private sector, and there are certain constraints in there. This is our initial consideration of this. The proposal is that we look at this further and we bring back these proposals to members for further consultation and discussion. Non-attendance at hospitals. As previously reported, hospitals across the city and county contribute to 10% of all unwanted fire signals, generally, 10%. And through the sample period between April and September 2022, a 6-month period, of the 143 AFAs, automatic fire alarms, that we attended across Queen's Medical Centre and King's Mill, that 96% of those turned out to be false alarms. Of the 3.5% that turned out to be actual incidents, the incidents was of such a small scale that they did not gone beyond the first ignited item. And we've put some examples there. One was a lift mechanism, light fitting, a microwave, a cotton bud fire, an overheated extractor fan. That shows, and I think that's credit to the individuals that work at hospitals. Hospitals are extremely well managed. They are professional individuals, and hospitals have got good procedures in place for the investigating of any events and any suspicions of a fire. Now, the suggestion that we're putting forward is that we stop attending hospitals, AFAs, that calls it a generator from AFAs, between 7 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock in the evening. Now, this is done on a risk-based approach, on the fact that the hospitals have large numbers of people in at that time. They have systems in place, and I think fundamentally is the fire service is better able to respond to incidents if they understand the information that is gained initially is very clear and concise. What could happen now, and what does happen, is that you would get somebody from a particular hospital phone up saying we have an alarm sounding, and as a result of that information, our control operators would mobilise one fire appliance to go and support, and they would arrive and carry out the support if need be. Large number of occasions that is investigated prior to our arrival, but we would continue, we would have a look, and we would try and support the hospital. What would be far better, in our opinion, would be if for us to receive calls during that time when there is a larger number of people on the premise to say that there is a fire or there is an incident, and as a result of that we would increase the mobilisation to 5 appliances. So it wouldn't take the time for the first appliance to go do their investigation, then call for additional resources. What we're saying is that through training, through additional support, we want to receive information as early as possible about the actual event at the hospital, not the fact that they have an alarm sounding. There's a caveat to everything that I've said there in terms of is that there'll be certain circumstances where if there's 2 alarms sounding, which is essentially 2 different detector heads, that would suggest that it is an incident, and we would automatically go and would automatically send a large amount of resources to be able to adopt that. If this proposal is agreed by members, there is lots of work to be done with hospitals in regards to assuring and giving confidence to the responsible persons about and a review of the practices that are in place. We have very good relationships with the hospitals, and we've been working with them for a number of years about how to prevent and further protect their buildings. I think lastly, just to finish off, and really just to stress the point, the service, the service is taking this approach. We're not taking it lightly, but it's done on a risk-based approach, and we very much want to ensure that we can use our resources to the most effective way about how we drive down risk across all premise times and spend time with the most vulnerable in our communities.
Thank you, Mick. There's an awful lot to unpick here. Before we go into it, I just want to draw members' attention to item 10 on page 34. Those are the 3 recommendations that officers are asking us to approve. So have those in your mind, please. Then we'll open it up for questions to Mick. John?
Chairman, thank you. I'm going to be propose recommendation changes that 10.1, 10.2 are removed. I'm happy to accept 10.3, and that we need to go away for further consultation with the hospitals. As far as I'm concerned, there's not enough information for us to make a decision. And what's been mentioned is that we'll speak to them after we've made the decision. Well, the decision needs to be, we need to have a conversation with them beforehand. Jason, as you know, we had a serious fire at the county offices, where I would say the things that we have in place are probably some of the best things in place, and we nearly lost that building. If it wasn't for the engines coming out as quick as they did and actually being able to tackle that, we probably would have lost the building if we and maybe lost life. For me, somebody that's been in hospital for 18 months is, yes, you have lots of staff, yes, you have lots of people. When there's a fire and something happens, if we're not going to go straight out and waiting for that second phone call or the second fire, them extra minutes, the extra seconds could be somebody dying. Because you and I both know 6 to 8 members of staff on a ward, it might take 3 members just to get one person off. So for me, at the moment in time, I'm uncomfortable doing anything before we've had them in-depth conversations. So I'm happy to support the last one, I'm not happy to support the others.
Do you want to come in now?
Yeah,
I just wanted to take a few questions and comments. I appreciate your point there, John. I'm just wondering about 10.2 particularly, because I don't think that's just about how they're reporting some of the data back to us. So there's that. And I would potentially ask you just to consider, before leaping in with 10.1 as a removal, to consider this option where instead of removing it, there was support consultation with the appropriate stakeholders
happy to do that.
About the non-attendance of automatic fire alarms. So just asking you to consider that before we get somewhere else. Nicola? I've got everyone I've noted just wants to speak.
It was a very specific question. The time hours, is there any basis for them? Obviously, we can't really talk to the hospital. Is it purely on the fire services perspective, or is there any sort of risk-based decision around the times?
I can answer one very quickly. Very quickly. It's a consideration of both. It's a consideration that those are generally working and waking hours for individuals at hospitals, but it also does align to the operating procedures that we've got within joint control. So it helps the management of that practice be more efficient and effective.
So if we talk to the hospitals, they might say, well, actually...
They might do,
yeah. Different time period.
Possibly so.
Dave?
Yeah, I'm not averse to sort of looking at charging, but I suppose my concern in that would be in terms of would the administration costs of it kind of outdo what you could charge, and then that wouldn't be worth it. It just create more bureaucracy. I think really, I suppose really, when I read this, I really think you know hospitals are one of the most dangerous places, especially places like QMC, and you know has discussions taken place and what taking place with the hospitals on any notice of any change in procedures with them?
Well, that's some of the questions.
Nick?
Yeah, thanks. I've got a number of things, so we probably get 5 questions on this. Obviously, we sit on this authority not as experts in fire, and so some of the questions may seem daft, but I think it's often good to have an outsider sort of perspective on it. And like Dave, when I was looking at this, I'm thinking, well, hang on a minute. Hospitals, obviously, the amount of chemicals and various things in there, vulnerable people asleep, people who can't move. But obviously, you know, even from you'd have to be an expert to realise it's a particularly dangerous environment, do you? And things can go off all the time. And you know, I've got big concerns about that in particular. I mean, I'm also concerned about the lack of detail. I think John is quite right there. I'm also concerned, knowing from you know friends in the trade union movement and so on, that the NHS is hugely underfunded at the moment. There's staffing levels. I'm not trying to make a political point, although I sort of am. You know, that as a result, they haven't got people run off the feet, basically. So I'm not sure this is potentially the worst time to be doing that. You know, I've got concerns about it, and then looking at 300 quid, if it means the question of life or death, and you know, I know I've got faith in Mick and so on, you know, I'm really, really uneasy about it. So there's that point, and so I do think that this needs to be looked at. And I think if we get a consultation, I'm being cynical here, when, you know, we send things out to consultation, many organisations, do we listen to people enough? You know, I don't want to make a big deal on it, but just by going to consultation, it basically says it's happening. I'm not suggesting living in North Korea, but you know what I'm saying. In terms of also a number of things worry me here about, I agree that people should be fined who are irresponsible, because it's costing taxpayers money, it's ruining resources. What I am worried about on that, though, is unscrupulous businesses or premises who just think, well, we've had 3, we know we're going to get fined, so let's just take the equipment out. And I know that's happened in multi-occupancy, but so, you know, endangering people even more. I'm not suggesting I've got a solution to this, I haven't, but that's a concern, although I do fully support the idea that people should be paying for it. In terms of the change to the reporting, actually, I think that's a good thing. So, I mean, I don't have enough information to vote for this at the moment. I want some information around, have we risk assessed what might happen with really unscrupulous businesses, takeaways, whatever else it is, and not attending hospitals, I'm not sure about at all.
Okay.
Sorry, I had one other question, which was the figure 1. It looks like the hospitals are actually doing really well in reducing their numbers. So they've gone from over 600 to 400. So that's a drop of a third in the last couple of years. Can we not just continue what we're doing in terms of helping them to reduce their numbers?
Okay. Robert, do you want to add? No. Okay. So, Mick, do you want to come and answer some of those points, and then I think I want to sat navels away and we can all agree on something.
Yes. No, thank you for the comments and the questions that have arisen. If I answer that one first, if I'm okay, and then I'll go into the more broader ones of consultation. One of the reasons that we've seen an improvement in the hospitals was because of work that they've had completed on the alarm system. They've had a significant amount of work that has been done to upgrade the system. So as a result of the upgrade of the system, we have seen a reduction. My concern, as somebody who's worked within this environment before, is over a period of time that will slightly increase as you get the general degradation of the system. So it's really pleasing what it is now, but that will be down to probably a capital investment within the hospitals. In terms of further reduction, I think it will be rather challenging doing what we are currently doing now. My advice would be that will plateau. Hopefully I'm wrong, but it's my belief that those numbers would stay pretty consistent unless we or the hospitals do something very differently. In regards to hospitals, they are very complex buildings and they have a lot of complex processes that go with them. But from experience and from analysis, they are very safe places in terms of fire safety, and that is because they are well managed and they employ professional people to manage the risks, and that is very clear from the analysis that we've done, not just during this period but previous periods, in terms of when we attend hospitals and the incidents that we care at hospitals. We are extremely confident in the individuals and the staff that's at the hospitals. In terms of the consultation is ongoing. It's we're always working with the hospitals to further reduce. Discussions have been taking place regarding the approach that we suggested. Further consultation has been had with NHS England regarding this approach, and you won't be surprised that that through the consultation there is obviously concern that's been raised through the consultation, which in terms of us wanting to do things differently, but this is no different to what's occurring up and down the country at a number of other hospitals. Like I said when I presented the report, there is a plethora of different ways and different response models to hospitals. I've not answered anything specifically there. Please.
Could I just ask about,
Yeah.
in terms of the charging, which I am supportive of, I'm concerned that unscrupulous people might, fiddle with equipment just to stop it going off, making the premises actually more dangerous to avoid being fined. I don't know if you can comment on that or have risk assessed it.
I think it is a risk. I think there is a risk that happens now, regardless whether there is a charging mechanism in place, and that's the reason we have a robust risk-based inspection programme that identifies the premises through a number of different data sets that determine what we should inspect. So we put our resources into premises where we think there is most risk to causing harm of individuals. I can't say that wouldn't happen. There is potential for that, and there is potential that it currently does happen, because the most unscrupulous of landlords don't want anybody from authority being there for one call, regardless of 2-3 calls. But there is a potential.
Just coming back to the point I made about how has discussions and work taking place with the hospitals in terms of proposals and changing procedures. I suppose really discussions ongoing is, for me, not far enough, unless it was something that they were comfortable with and come to some kind of agreement with us in terms of what procedures should be, really.
I suppose I'm not sure we'll ever get to a place where hospitals are comfortable, because what happens now is that the service almost acts as the level of assurance for those types of incidents. So I don't think we'll ever get to a place that hospitals are really in a position where they are totally agree. I think we need to get into a position where they are more comfortable, and I do take your point. I think that would be something that if members wish, we can look at.
Back on. Yeah, I mean, in a sense, I suppose really, I understand that they might not say that they're comfortable, and I suppose really the fallback on that is if other authorities, fire authorities are doing it, what is the process and the results of how they've got to where they've got to would be, I suppose, allay my fears a bit.
Okay, so let's try and get to some resolutions on recommendations. I hope that we're all okay with 10.2. So I'm going to leave that.
Fine.
I'm looking around. Then I think we're okay with 10.3 on the basis of Nick's points that when it comes back from that consultation, there's definitely a cost-risk ratio put in for us so that we can make those decisions whether we think it's worth that in terms of the potential dangers that might come versus the financial benefits. And so then we're on to 10.1, which there's been a lot of points that are incredibly valid, and I think there's the strength of feeling from members is that the ongoing consultation has not fed into this report quite yet, and therefore there's a way of, hopefully at the very next committee, so it's not drawn out, some consultation feedback that brings in the comparators that David says, that brings in possible mitigations. As Nicholas said, there's options about changing the times if the hospital might think they're better. So I think that we support the consultation with appropriate stakeholders on the non-attendance of automatic alarms, but then that comes back and we either then agree with it or we don't. We either then, either it looks okay to us and safe or it's not, but I think we're at the point where we're not quite, we don't feel like we've quite got the response back from those stakeholders that give us that confidence.
Chairman, can I just come in?
Absolutely.
Sorry, thank you, Jason. I'm just a bit concerned of the ramifications of that decision that it shouldn't be made. You may not agree, it shouldn't be made by a subcommittee. I think personally it should go to the full committee where everybody can input, because it does affect lots of people. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, I think we're a very important committee.
That's right.
Well, look, I still think the governance process is to be decided. I think we should digest that information because we've been the committee working on it, and then we can make that decision when that report comes back, that we either make a recommendation to a full committee or we enact that, so that the governance is largely still there for us. If we feel like we're unsure, or there's still some questions to be answered, I guess we can take that decision there. So I'm the rewording, Catherine, I'm guessing, is support the consultation with appropriate stakeholders on the proposal not to attend. And I think we all want it back as soon as possible, really, for your benefit and for ours, so that we can get it there. Are we at a point where you're as content as you can be and we are? Or?
No, I'm really content, and I value the comments that have been made by members. I suppose in terms of guidance for self, I want to be able to commit the consultation as broadly as possible. So if you could give me some guidance on the timescales that you, because next committee would be 8 March time.
Well, I don't want to set some time frame for you to do that, because I think what we want is to see the responses from those stakeholders and then your comments about how we mitigate those responses and have that confidence. So if it's not quite March, April, if you think it's the next one, that's fine, but I just think as soon as it's possible.
Okay.
David,
I think that as soon as it's possible is quite important, really, because, I mean, I'm going to be retiring. I won't be here after May. And I think to try and bring this up with a new group of people, other authorities might be bringing in different people and then hitting them with that kind of decision when they're very new to the committee or very new to the authority. I mean, I'm fairly new to the authority myself, but I think whereas I'd be quite happy to kick it into the future. That's a decision that I don't have to make. I think it would be unfair of me to do that, really.
Can I suggest then, Chair, that I carry on with the consultation? I do the affairs of the consultation as members have requested, and I keep you updated in terms of how that consultation is going, and we can decide whether we feel it's robust enough to be able to bring something back to this committee or whether to raise that.
Yeah, I think that's a sensible solution.
Can we just identify, who the stakeholders are in terms of we're talking about the hospitals here?
Well, appropriate stakeholders, I guess, would
Yes.
still mean those hospitals, and there are large ones and small ones, but something formal with the FBU.
I was going to say, because the workforce is going to want an input.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, the FBU are obviously a critical stakeholder. Yeah. Are we as content as we can be on that? Right, thank you. Then we are all ready then. We're making good time.
Chair,
Yes. Do you
Has
want me to formally
everybody-
move that?
has everybody agreed with the amendment? Yes.
I believe so.
Lovely, thank you.
Yes, we have. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, so then we're on to the last, I believe the last item 6, which is the Inspectorate's report, areas for improvement, page 35. Is it actually Nick?
Thank you, Chair. This should be a very short report, members, because members will be aware that this has already been to full fire authority. And essentially what the report covers is the outcome or the outturns of the inspection that was conducted by Her Majesty's Inspector at Constabulary for Fire and Rescue Services back in 2021. And essentially, as part of that inspection, we was extremely pleased with the results, extremely pleased, and it's worth just reminding ourselves. It's always nice to say good things. Is that service did extremely well, and it was good across the board. But regardless of how pleasing the result was, there is always areas for improvement, and HMIC recognised and identified 4 areas of improvement, and it was agreed at the Fire Authority that we would follow the same government processes we have done previously, and the respective subcommittees would pick up the scrutiny and governance of those areas for improvement. And the 2 areas for improvement for the Community Safety Committee are identified under 2.3, and one of them is around the service should assure itself of the risk-based inspection programme, and then the second one being it's regarding the response with the mobilised data terminals and their reliability to allow staff to access risk information. There is detail in the report about what those actually are, but I know that detail's covered at the Fire Authority. I'm happy to further expand on that, Chair, or I'm happy to take questions.
Let's see what members want, because they've obviously all read the report. Is there any detailed questions or anything?
No.
Just make a comment, really. I'm pleased that we've got where we are. I'm pleased that I think it's right that we look to improve the bits that not quite there yet. And it's just part of continual improvement, really, which is what we should all be sort of striving for. So yeah, no, I think it's really good progress, and I think we should thank the staff for getting to where we are. But it's a really important thing that we get to where we need to be.
Absolutely concur. Any other questions or comments? You let off the hook.
Thank you.
Okay. Right, are we all happy to accept the recommendations on page 39?
Yeah.
Right, thank you very much. And that concludes the meeting. Safe journey home, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.